Hi everyone, welcome back to Soundrise. Um, as you might have seen, we released today our um, 10th episode, and since we are since we want to celebrate our first 10 episodes, we've decided to give you guys a bonus episode where we want to rank all our episodes from 1 to 10. Um, and before we start ranking the episodes, we would like to thank all our listeners and fans and patrons for supporting us, for helping us out. You guys are the main factor that drives us, that keeps our motivation up high. So thank you so much. Thank you for all of your feedback, and we're more than willing to give you more content with an even better quality and higher standards. So Vlada, would you like to start with your own list?
Thanks, Alex. First of all, I have to say this was incredibly difficult because I like everything we've done so far,
We're proud of
and
it.
I feel like, yes, and I feel like we're doing a disservice to those episodes that will be lower in the ranks. So, dear listeners, we really believe that so far we've done a great job, but I also feel like we have improved somewhat. So I hope you can give us your own feedback and let us know what you feel about our, let's say, evolution when it comes to podcasting. So, number 10, for me, it's the episode we did about Tina Turner. Now, it was
Oh,
quite a
wow.
good episode, I think. I really enjoyed listening to Tina Turner's stuff, and I'm glad we had the chance to talk about some records that might have been kind of forgotten a bit because she's mostly known for her big hits, and then all the other tracks on those records sort of get overlooked.
She's the
However, I
old
was
school mainstream, so to say.
yes. However, I was a bit disappointed that we didn't touch upon her earlier work that she did with her ex-husband Ike. So that was a bit of a downside for me.
I remember your disappointment because you thought that the Ike stuff was more kind of more enjoyable than the post Ike stuff, right?
Yeah, at least for me. But then again, if we look at it from a different perspective, it was great to delve into that 80s stuff, uh, stuff that might seem outdated to some, but which I feel still holds a lot of quality, is still very valuable and worth listening to. Number
Yeah.
nine. Okay, number nine, I have to go with Jefferson Airplane. Not because of the
Oh,
artists themselves, but mainly because it was our first episode. So I think at that time we still weren't quite sure what we wanted to do with our show. It was more of a test, like a pilot episode. It helped us figure things out. We decided to shorten our show a bit afterwards. The music in that episode was absolutely beautiful.
yeah.
I really enjoyed going through those records.
We
Um,
picked some decent tracks, to be honest.
Yes, yes, and so I still feel this episode is great in its own right, but I also feel like those were our first steps, so may not be um, as convincing as other episodes.
It's really interesting because a completely different impression from my side because given that it was our first episode, because of that, the Jefferson Airplane episode kind of holds a special place in my heart, to be fair. But I just want to quickly tell my bottom two, so to say, and they are quite different compared to yours. My number 10 is the episode about Van der Graaf generator. Um, to be fair, the first reason why I wasn't particularly impressed with it. Again, this is a learning process, guys, as you know. And the Van der Graaf generator episode was our second. Um, I don't really remember it. I don't think that the band was particularly interesting. I haven't got back to any of that stuff. I even think that some of my ratings were too generous in that episode.
I'm so mad at you right now.
I
Dear
know that
listeners,
was
this is utter nonsense when it comes to Van der Graaf Generator. Is one It's one of those great unsung bands that deserve much more attention. I mean, if you were talking about some mainstream act, then I would say, sure, fine, okay, you didn't like it. You decided to trash it a bit. But this
nah.
is such a great band that is under
It,
a lot of people's radar that I feel you're doing them a horrible injustice by saying such
Well,
stuff.
sorry, Mr. Fanboy. I know that that band is. I think you said in that episode that it's the most authentic band that you ever heard, or at least one of the most authentic bands. To be fair, I don't really see myself going back to those records. So
Well,
y-
your loss. But I'll agree with you on one thing. I think that this episode, because it was one of our early episodes, may not have been as exciting as some other ones. But I loved it for the content. I loved it because we covered one of the most experimental, adventurous bands in the 60s and 70s. So let's leave it at that, right?
yeah, let's be politically correct here. Yeah.
Okay, and what's your number nine?
Yeah, my number nine is, and this is probably gonna be another shot at you, Vlada. It was the jazz talk. Unlike the
Boo!
unlike the previous pick, where it was all about the artist. This one was kind of problematic. Well, that's a strong word. This was I wasn't as impressed with this one because it was the first episode, the very first episode when YouTube declared war on us, and that's why I quite well remember our feelings back then. So that's the first reason, and the second one is that some of the tracks or some of the records, to be precise, weren't that convincing. Especially the first one, the what was the name? Aftonland. Am I right?
Yes, Aftenland. And I just, no comment. Dear listeners, I mean, honestly, sometimes I wonder why I'm even trying here to educate this youngling. But let's just. Let's just ignore these horrible comments and enjoy the beautiful music out there.
It's up to you, dear listeners. So we've got our bottom two sorted, so we can now move on to the next one. So Vlada, what's your next? Do you have anything shocking for me?
Uh, hmm. Okay, so uh, number number eight for me would be Van der Graaf generator because of the reasons I already stated. I feel like we were still not fully gelling at that point, but I still really loved the band. How about you? What's your number eight?
I'm quite surprised. I thought because of your fandom that you would put it much higher. So my number eight is, and this is another shock for you, Vlada, is the Jack White episode. Um, even
But
though
that's fine. That's fine.
yeah, even though I do go back to his stuff, and to be fair, now I like it even more. What I found really strange about this episode was that we sounded as if we disagreed much, but our ratings were quite close. So that was a bit confusing, and you were kind of defensive towards the ends of the episode because of the third record, which I didn't like that much. But I have to say, I have to give it to Jack White. So far, actually, he's been a pretty pleasant surprise. To be fair, I'm really glad that we, in this time and age, have such such musicians who actually pay attention to the old stuff and kind of and want to kind of maintain that energy.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was a great episode. Yeah, we had some, um, disagreements, but I think overall both of us were pretty impressed with what we listened to, more or less.
I was just a
To
bit contradictory, but never mind.
Yeah, and that's what I enjoyed about the episode, that we had that kind of exchange of ideas, and we had slightly different views on the records, but still we both showed appreciation for Jack White and his work, and I enjoyed the fact that we both heard some of the similar things in his music.
The tracks that we had um, that we had planned for this episode were absolutely fire before we got hit by YouTube. So sorry guys for having a dig at YouTube, but the songs that we wanted to play are absolutely brilliant, and I really like to go back to those ones. So Vlada, you can now carry on.
Okay, so now it's I think number 7, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That's my favorite number, by the way.
Yes, number 7. I'll go with Mumford and Sons. But I have to say, I really enjoyed this episode, even though I didn't really like the record so much.
Guilty pleasure.
But I feel like they inspired us to make some rather interesting commentary, and I
I can
feel
I
this.
can see, even though we don't have our cameras on, I can see your face and your joy because we were so harsh on them.
And I think this is the main reason why our listeners should check out this episode, is that I don't want to say that we were absolutely brutal towards them, but I think we were just trying to be plain honest, and it might have come across as being brutal. What do you say?
I would say that's a healthy dose of banter, to be fair. But I don't want to spoil anything. My number 7 is Tina Turner. Actually, I mostly agree with your points. I think we were again a little bit too generous, and I think I was. In fact, we covered 3 records. I thought I was very very generous for the third one, and I kind of regret it. But overall, I think we were kind of flat, not too impressed, but not brutal towards Cena. We were just glad that we could kind of pay a tribute um, to a legendary pop star. So that's my number 7, and that's my favorite number, by the way.
Oh yeah, I feel, as far as ratings are concerned, it's not always easy to give a proper rating because there's so many things you have to take into consideration, especially with
Especially if you
such.
if you go back to the albums.
Yeah, and I mean, Tina is such a talented artist that, just even if the album may not be that great, there's always some redeeming qualities. So it's hard to give it like a very low rating. Even though, if I remember correctly, I gave that third album a relatively low rating, right?
And I think you were quite spot on with that one. So Vlada, we're nearing the top 5. So now it gets more and more interesting. So what's your number 6?
Uh, my number 6 is Gnarls Barkley,
Ooh.
which remains our most popular episode to date for some reason. And I think the main reason why it's so popular is that we also had a lot of interesting things to say about uh, CeeLo Green and about the Danger Mouse. I feel like we provided a lot of insight into the artists, but we also didn't want to spare them in any way. And I feel like we had a lot of great energy in that episode.
I don't have much. I don't have to add much. My number 6 is also Norris Barkley. I would just like to add one thing. I thought, Vlada, that your contribution to that um, to that episode wasn't that huge. You were mostly slating them, whereas I was quite impressed. But I
No, I
have to
was
say,
being fair. And dear listeners, Again, there are some half truths coming from the second host here. So, first of all, I did criticize them a lot, but I also pointed out a lot of positive things. So, if you want to see what I said about Gnarls Barkley and where we disagreed, you should check out the episode itself.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So the top five. Now we're talking about the top half of the list. So my number five is Muddy Waters. Um, I found it difficult to cope with a deluded fanboy, which is the second host of this show, and I was kind
Not
of a
deluded, objective, not
please, dear
deluded.
listeners, bear in
Who-
mind
who-
that
Whoever
this
listened to our episodes can tell that my ratings are as objective as possible. Just because Mari got higher ratings, just it's just a testimony to his greatness, nothing else.
I can say that I was borderline abused by this old fart, but the music for me is okay, so nothing much to add. At. So, what's your number five, Lada?
My number five is uh, Jack White. And again, you mentioned that we both really enjoyed listening to Jack White and had somewhat similar ratings, even though we disagreed about some of the records and tracks. But still, a great episode, I think. Lots of interesting commentary by either of us. And I enjoyed exchanging these different points of view, especially when I realized that you also recognize how talented Jack White was.
Yeah, that's nice to hear. All right, so the number four um, for me is the Pearl Jam episode. Um, I really liked the chat that we had, and obviously we are quite familiar with the act and with the music scene that Pearl Jam belonged to. Overall, um, a nice episode. I'm not crazy about it, but it was nice chatting, and the length was also spot on, I would say, and obviously the music that we commented is still pretty much impressive. So I think the first impression still aligns with the impression that I have today, Vlada.
Uh, yeah, I also enjoy that episode as well. It's also my number four, right? Great record. It was so nice to listen to the new Pearl Jam release and then talk about our own experience discovering Pearl Jam, especially given the age gap between us. I really enjoyed that. Hearing your story about how you discovered Pearl Jam, how your generation in general discovered Pearl Jam. So definitely one of the better episodes for me as well.
All right, so the top three, Vlada, hit us.
Number three, Jazz Talk, because I really,
Oh,
really enjoyed the artists that we covered that I suggested. And also, it gave us an opportunity to talk about Scandinavia and Norway, which is, I think, our favorite country. Both of us really love Norway. I used to live there.
that's
You
true.
speak fluent Norwegian. So I liked being able to relate music to something that happened in my life, to my own personal experiences. So that's why I hold this episode very dear to my heart.
Shout out to all our Scandinavian listeners. My number three is Mumford and Sons. Remember quite well that day when we recorded the episode. Before we started recording, I remember quite well that I was in a very bad mood for some reason. But once we started talking about it, I really enjoyed every moment of that episode. And yeah, the only reason why I didn't put these guys higher or this episode to be precise, is because our ratings were too generous. And again, that's sometimes hard to give. It's sometimes hard to give proper ratings, but nevertheless, really enjoyed it, and I hope you did the same, Lada.
Oh yeah, most definitely. It's also a great episode in terms of energy, in terms of banter, and I loved every moment.
Right. So, what's your next pick?
Okay, so number two is our last episode about James. And the reason why it's because not only did it give me an opportunity to discover another fantastic band, which I was only very vaguely familiar with before, but I also feel that uh, both of us were very enthusiastic about this band,
Yeah.
and I loved the way our conversation flowed. I think that it really felt like being somewhere in a bar and just chatting about music, and I love that
Mm,
feeling, that overall feeling. How about you? What's your take about this
that's a,
episode?
that's a, I must say that's a lovely description. My number two is a bit controversial, and it's Jefferson Airplane. I know, guys, that you don't find it so easy to listen to this episode in its entirety. You might fall asleep because of the length, but this episode really holds a special place in my heart. Also, the band, I really like the band, and the records that we talked about. Again, it was um, our first episode. It's when we started this show, and we're very proud of what we've done so far. So this is something that marked our beginnings, so to say. Yes, the length is a bit problematic, but the songs and the overall chat, for me, you know, I was really pleased with this one, Lada.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I put it lower, of course, but still a very significant episode. And I also really enjoyed revisiting Jefferson Airplane as such an amazing band, a string of quality albums. So definitely, this one is longer than our other episodes, but still I think one of the advantages that it has over other episodes is that we might have provided more insight due to less time constraints. So if you have the time, take some time off and listen to our Jefferson Airplane episode.
Oh, good shepherd, feed my sheep, as it says. So now the final moment of this bonus episode is our number one pick, and for me, that's obviously the James episode. I was really looking forward to it. I love the band, and guys, once you hear it, you will understand what I'm talking about now. Um, and I can't really provide any better description that Vlada did in this episode about our discussion, about our chat. So um, yeah, no, absolutely a brilliant a brilliant chatter with you, Vlada.
Thank you, and I also really appreciated that you suggested this band, and it was such a pleasure listening to them and then discussing the records with you. And for my number one, I will choose Muddy. Mostly
Boo.
because Muddy is such a great hero for me, so I was so enthusiastic being able to talk about him. And I know that it may come across as a lot of fanboyism there, but as I said, I'm absolutely trying to be objective here, and there's not much I can say against Muddy Waters. You know that's
Excuses, excuses. We know that, Vlada.
so all the ratings in that episode are absolutely justified. And you know what I liked about that episode is seeing how you would react to this kind of music, because I know that you don't really listen to this old timey music so much, especially when
Super
it
old
comes.
time.
Yeah, you know the recording quality, all that stuff. You're not so accustomed to it. You want You know, you want Gnarls Bark, you want instant stuff. You know, like McDonald's. You want the music equivalent of McDonald's.
Wow, that's so yeah. That's some. I don't know. I don't want to be too offensive here, so I'll kind of keep my tongue inside my mouth here. So there you go, dear listeners. Please tell us if you have any standout episodes. What were your favorites? What were your least favorites? Of course, we always welcome any kind of feedback. We seek any way to improve our quality and to give you the best possible content.
Yes, thanks everyone, and hope you enjoyed this special episode. Also, check out our latest episode about James that we already touched upon in this episode. A huge shout out to all our listeners and especially to our patrons. You guys are the best, and thank you so much for keeping us going. This has been a great ride for us thus far, and I hope there will be many, many episodes to come, and that soon enough we will have 100 best episodes list.
That's right. We keep our enthusiasm high. See you then in the next episode, guys.
See you.